Hey guys, welcome to the Overtime Sports Show solo. It's AV. Appreciate you guys joining us. As always, it's a pleasure coming to you each and every week, bringing you good sports information. As always, we tell you each week to like, comment, share your thoughts with us. We're going to do a little different twist today. I know we got a lot of great things happening. We could talk about Deshaun Watson and all his drama, but we're going to leave that on the table. The NBA Finals, I'm hoping and praying that we'll get to a Game 7 with Golden State and Boston. Hopefully they'll let it go to Game 7, but Steph Curry is definitely off the chain. The Astros won today, and they're rolling. They took the series against the Texas Rangers. But what I want to talk about, since we are speaking about baseball, is I'm joined now by a special guest, critically acclaimed producer and director. Andre Gaines is here to tell us about this brand new documentary that's going to be a 2-hour documentary on the History Channel, and it's going to talk about life after Jackie Robinson, of course, who was the first Black player to play in the modern Major League Baseball and broke a whole lot of barriers. Andre Gaines, welcome, man, to the Overtime Sports Show. I appreciate you.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, appreciate you having me as well.
I realized one of my uncles, Uncle Fred, was an avid Dodgers fan. You could not get him to move away from the. I never understood as a kid why he was so glued to the Dodgers until they sat down and gave us the history lesson of Jackie Robinson and the impact that he.
Yeah, can you hear me? Uh-oh, you froze on me.
All right, I'm back on.
Okay, I'm back here. Yeah, sorry, you froze on me.
Yeah, we disappeared for a second, so I had to go to the second round. But yeah, my uncle, man, he was an avid Dodgers fan, and like I said, when we finally got a history lesson of the impact of Jackie Robinson and what he brought to the game, we'll talk about just from that, because I know you're doing this 2-hour documentary on the History Channel that I definitely want to celebrate you on for doing, and talk about just his impact on the game of baseball before we move into the lesson about after Jackie.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. With Jackie Robinson, there's kind of two things that are important. I mean, one is the idea that Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in baseball and then everything was wonderful is a total misnomer. It wasn't the case at all. Mm-hmm. But you talk about your uncle and the Negro Leagues, which a lot of people don't realize was a huge business in the Black community. Mm-hmm. And I mean, churches would plan their Sundays around. I mean, it's almost playing their Sundays around the games, and it's almost like when you watch footage of the Negro Leagues, you really feel like you're missing out. It's like you should have been in that era. There's something that you really missed out on, to have that type of community around a single sports game. But Jackie was in the Negro Leagues, and what happened was that when Jackie went to the Dodgers, was recruited on the Dodgers, then if you have a limited amount of money and you're going to go spend it to see a baseball game, you want to go see Jackie, in those major leagues, as opposed to going and supporting the Negro Leagues, where you still have these segregated ball clubs, as opposed to seeing the guy, this great symbol that's going there and integrating the major leagues. So that's kind of what ended up happening. And for all of these players, including the ones that came immediately after Jackie and then the ones that we follow after his retirement, I mean, he was their first idol. And he was the first idol of so many of these folks. And I mean, even Dr. King talks about Jackie Robinson as being mentor to him, just because Jackie had reached the national prominence before
Right.
Dr. King had. So he said, you kind of gave me a blueprint on how to progress with civil rights. And so he just provided this path for everybody. And that's why so many of our grandparents and uncles and folks like that really gravitated towards him because of how much they idolized him.
Andre Gaines is my special guest on the Overtime Sports Show. We're talking about the 2-hour documentary After Jackie, and of course, we celebrate the impact, as you just mentioned, that Jackie Robinson had not only on baseball, but as dealing with segregation, racial discrimination, standing up for the rights of African Americans. And one thing I love, Andre, is that when you make an impact, that when God has you as a trendsetter and you're making an impact in this earth, the best result is when you have others who come behind you, and it just doesn't end with you. And so talk about some of the players in this documentary that you're definitely going to highlight, because I think of people like Bill White, Bob Gibson. Talk about their impact continuing after Jackie retired.
Yeah, so after Jackie Robinson retires, he becomes a very prominent civil rights leader, which we don't really see. I mean, we get to see that in this film. We get to see Jackie Robinson giving speeches. We get to see him marching. We get to see him protesting. We get to see a side of Jackie Robinson that we don't normally see. We get to see the agitator side of Jackie Robinson. I made a film last year called The One and Only Dick Gregory about the late, great comedian who was a self-described agitator. And we get to see the agitator version of Jackie Robinson, as opposed to kind of the perfect angel that they wanted to build and that they manufactured for the sake of actually breaking the color barrier. But what we see is that when he retires and he's fighting for civil rights and he's on the trail in Jim Crow South, going from place to place, he's also inviting some of his mentees, some of these players that are coming after him. And that focus is really on 3 players in our story, which is Bill White, Bob Gibson, and Curt Flood. All 3 of them play for the Cardinals, St. Louis Cardinals team, and all of them broke extraordinary barriers. And they had Jackie there as a guru in many regards to support them, as an advocate, as a mentor, as a guide, to be there and support them in all of their endeavors. And so we get to see what really happens in the life of Jackie Robinson after he leaves the game. But we also see how he is the through line. He's connected to all of these guys that come after him, and he is there fighting for them. And that's really his legacy, you know, is what he did for others. That's his legacy. That's what he leaves behind. Is not, I mean, the integrated baseball in the Jackie Robinson story is probably the least important thing that he did. In the end, what he did and how he helped all of these guys. And not, financially, spiritually, emotionally, philosophically, all of the above. He was there, and he did an enormous good, because at the end of the day, the proceeds of what it is that they did, meaning, Curt Flood, as an example, this is somebody who created the modern free agency. Bill White is the first and only Black president of a major league, just across all of sport, not just baseball, all of sport. Bob Gibson, just a dominant force, so much so that they had to lower the mound. He was a cerebral pitcher, but he was also, this huge, powerful guy, and they had to lower the mound because of this man. I mean, to have those type of legacies, they have Jackie to thank, and we have them to thank.
Yeah. Andre, what would you want people to walk away from after watching the 2-hour documentary? What's the most, because I know as a producer, as a director, what do you want people to walk away with after seeing the impact? Because it seems like when we look at our world today, a lot of the things that they were dealing with back then, as long as this earth remains, we're still going to be dealing with, racial discrimination and all kind of stuff that's happening in our communities.
Yeah, we're going to be dealing with that, as long as the power structure is in place. And the way that it's been designed is, makes it very difficult in order to subvert that power. But what I think you take away from a story like this is that you can do your part. is that
Yeah.
even if you can do your part in your job, or do your part in your industry, or do your part, as a doctor in your hospital, or as a lawyer in the courtroom, as a broadcaster, as a storyteller, as a filmmaker, as any one of these parts all add up to a greater whole. And with the St. Louis Cardinals team, and with Bill White, Bob Gibson, and Curt Flood, the things that they were doing to advance the cause of freedom and liberty,
Yeah.
and to fight against racism and prejudice and discrimination, they didn't even realize the level of impact that they were
Right.
going to have generations from now. They were frankly doing it to just survive.
Mm-hmm.
They tell stories. I mean, Bill White, for instance, was responsible for integrating the housing situation during spring training in St. Petersburg, Florida, with the Cardinals team, because you had white players would stay with white players, and black players would stay with black players on the colored side of town. And the white players would have these beautiful accommodations, and black players would have these subpar accommodations. And they didn't want that. The teammates didn't want that. It hurt morale. It hurt camaraderie, all of these things. And so he goes and actually talks to August Busch, the owner of the Cardinals team, who's the heir to the Budweiser fortune,
Yeah.
and says, we got to do something, and actually, solicits him to the point where he buys a hotel and puts all the team together in that hotel, because he's a private owner, so he could do that. But if it wasn't for the tenacity and the audacity of someone like Bill White to go and do that, then we wouldn't have seen that type of integration occur across the league. But these guys were doing it in their own little bubble. And when they were achieving it in their own bubble, it had a reverberation across the world, and really across American society. And they didn't realize that. They weren't planning on it. They just were trying to survive. But
Survive. Yeah.
look what
Yeah.
happened. So if you do your part just in your little section of the world, your organization, your company, your industry, whatever it is, you don't have any idea the level of impact that's going to have on someone else, some 8-year-old kid, who 10 years from now, 20 years from now, going to be looking back and say, oh, wow, this is something that someone did and sacrificed for my behalf.
We're talking about the new 2-hour documentary, After Jacking, which will appear on the History Channel. And Andre, as the producer and director, I want you to, this is always a question we get, especially when it comes to baseball. We see a lot of players coming from the Dominican Republic. We see a lot of players coming from overseas. How do we get the baseball impact back into, or how do we develop and grow it in our inner city, especially with our youth, man?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because we Jr. about this. We talked to Mookie Betts about this. CC Sabathia is in here. Tony Regan's at MLB. We talked to all of these guys about that, because the interesting thing, history is cyclical. I mean, right now is about 8% black ball players in the league. That was the equivalent amount when Jackie Robinson retired in 1957. So you have that number when Jackie Robinson retires, and then you have this sort of renaissance and peak and plateau kind of all happening over maybe 3 decades, 70s, 80s, 90s, tad into the early 2000s, really peaking with Ken Griffey Jr. And then now it's gone back down.
Yeah.
And one of the main things that they all talk about is just the economic barrier. It's suddenly way more expensive. We have the traveling clubs, you've got the cost of the equipment, you have all of these types of things that you have to deal with. And if you have those economic barriers, especially in black and brown communities, the game is going to suffer by virtue of not being able to even recruit that talent. So MLB has a number of initiatives. They're trying their level best. I mean, we went through kind of a litany of programs that they're working on to try in different avenues and different tentacles and branches to try to bring black kids and brown kids back to the game. When you talk to Mookie Betts, when I talked to him, he just was like, yeah, well, they also need to put folks like him, like Mookie, out front.
Right.
In the same way that you see in the NBA or the same way that
Mhm.
you see in the NFL, put those black players out front so black kids can see, so that they can see that, okay, this is something that's achievable. Because otherwise, the greatest risk to our communities is really lack of access.
Right.
You don't know that you can achieve. You don't even know there was a black president.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
you don't think that you can ever achieve something like that if
Mhm.
you don't see it. So it's like once
Yeah.
you have it, then it's like, oh, okay, I can do that
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, because I mean, you ride through. I think about when we were growing up. For us to ride through the community, we didn't see, basically didn't see baseball fields. We didn't see batting cages. We didn't see none of this. It was mainly football field, basketball court. So the interest level, I remember even in high school, the interest level for us to field a team was very little, man. If we had maybe
Yeah.
15 players, it was amazing. Trying to play, and you can imagine trying to play with that little bit of a squad. And it's like you say, it wasn't in front of us. It wasn't something that we saw all the
Yeah.
time, but definitely something that can make a major impact.
It wasn't right in front of your face. I mean, I grew up my sports playing tennis and golf. There was
Wow. Yeah.
no black kids there. But I
No.
grew up because my dad.
Yeah.
My dad was a tennis champion, statewide, and a golfer. I saw him with his buddies golfing, and so I grew up seeing that. So again, you end up doing what it is that you have access to. You end up having
Yeah.
access to that, and it's like that's what you're going to do. But if you're driving around and all you see
Yeah.
are basketball or football fields, basketball courts or football fields, and
Yeah.
that's where it's going to go.
Man, I'm excited about it. A 2-hour documentary on the History Channel. And man, me and my dad would sit and watch the History Channel a lot. So I'm excited about this. I actually think, man, it's something that we definitely need to show into our schools as well. I mean, they need to see this
That's right.
across the board. Yeah, to see
Yeah.
the impact. But invite everybody to watch it.
Yeah, so we're definitely doing History Channel is definitely doing educational initiatives, not only into elementary schools but into universities,
Yeah.
as well as MLB. But it's available to watch this Saturday, June 18th, 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. And if you're not able to catch it then you can also stream it on the History app the next day on June 19th, and it would be available going forward. But if you want to watch the premiere, then you can see it June 18th, Saturday, June 18th at 8 p.m. Eastern and 7 p.m. Central.
This is the perfect weekend for it. Perfect weekend to spend time with the family and your children and watching. And let's see the impact that our African-American baseball players have made. Now, Andre, before I let you get out of here, man, I got to ask you, I'm an Astros fan. We're in the midst of baseball season. We're rolling right now. And, who do you see so far as the team to beat? I know it's still early. We haven't gotten into the dog days, but the Astros are looking pretty good.
Well, yeah, you're getting me in trouble. I'm going for whoever you're going for. That's so I can get invited back onto this show at some point in time. Yeah, no,
Yes,
I think that you're kind of right on the money there. So it seems like there's a path forward for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love your show, man. Think it's great.
Thank you.
Invite me back on one of these days.
Yeah, definitely. You're definitely gonna come back, man, because I just want to, as we move forward, I love and appreciate the mindset that you have, the history, the way that you have engrafted what was taking place, not only then but now. So it's definitely a conversation that is worth having, just more than these 15 minutes that you and I have shared today. So I definitely want to bring you back on it, of course, in the future and do more conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's I have a personal mission as a storyteller to really put these figures and these events in their proper place in history.
Yes, sir.
These guys, Bill White, Bob Gibson, Kurt Flood, they haven't gotten their due. So hopefully they get a little bit of that through After Jackie.
We'll keep telling the story. How can everybody keep up with you, Andre Gaines?
I'm on Instagram mainly. Andre L Gaines. Just remember the L. So I'm on there, and you can follow me through Instagram.
I appreciate it, man. After Jackie, the 2-hour documentary this Saturday, 7 p.m. on the History Channel. Make sure you check it out. Be sure to follow Andre, and he'll be back on the Overtime Sports Show with me. Thank you, my brother. I
Thank you
appreciate
so much,
man.
All right.
And go Stros. All right, y'all, that does it for us today. Just abbreviated version of the Overtime Sports Show. Be sure to follow me at Faith and Fame with AV. Like, share, and definitely repost this one because this is one for the ages for everybody to see. Make it a great day. Happy Juneteenth. Happy Father's Day coming up this weekend to everybody. We salute all the dads and we salute you. Thank you, Cole Red. Thank everybody for coming on today. You guys have a great Wednesday.